Communication Error.
Welcome to episode 38 of the Communication Error Podcast, the community patch notes episode of the state of AAA Gaming. Now, before we get into it, we have a very special guest one of the people that I get my game recommendations from all the time. If you have a Nintendo Switch and you want to know what games to play, we have All In Eric from the All In Podcast. Welcome. How are you?
I'm doing very well, gentlemen. Thank you so much for the invite. Very happy to be hanging out. Cheesy, you've been on our show before. John, we got to get you on, Johnny.
We were on together. Me and Cheesy were on.
Oh, no. Yeah, that's right.
Johnny was only there because I got invited.
That's all right. I forget. Well, we were talking about Mario
Wonder. We got
to
get you on by yourself.
Yeah, then I could really shine. I'm not being held back by Cheesy.
Hey, man.
Yeah. I mean, he's got the third best beard here, so I mean.
It's true. But really
once again, thank you guys so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. Come to hang out. There's a lot to talk about tonight.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Now, before we get into everything, make sure I don't even know what I'm doing, but we like to have the guests introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about what you do on the internet, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, how did All In podcast get started, and you and Seth, like how did that collaboration start?
Well, like you said, I'm Eric with All In, a Nintendo podcast where me and my amazing co-host Seth every week put out a nice chunky, like 2.5, 3-hour show all about the world of the Big N. We do weekly indie showcases. We frequently have independent developers on or other creators within the Nintendo landscape to come and talk about their amazing creations. We do reviews. We do retrospectives. We do top fives. We do all kinds of stuff on our wonderful weekly variety podcast. We're also on YouTube. We're always making new content, always staying busy, but go ahead and give us a shout out at, again, All In Podcast. But to answer your question, Cheesy, about how Seth and I got started, a lot of the people who have listened to our show, our main show, know this already, but I was actually a television broadcaster in the military for 7 years. And I happened to be stationed down at lovely... Sorry, every time I try to compliment Fort Polk, it just kind of comes out like that. Every time I was stationed down at lovely Fort Polk, Louisiana, and that was where I met my co-host at the time, Seth Sturgill. He was actually working at GameStop, and we just met. We immediately clicked, and years later, we would eventually start this wonderful Nintendo content creation journey together. Again, All In, a Nintendo podcast, at All In on Facebook, on Twitter, at All In Media on YouTube. So if you like the Big N, if you like playing video games, if you like having a nice, fun, positive community to be a part of, we'd love for you to come over and be a part of ours.
Yeah, I was not kidding about getting all my game recommendations from the All In podcast. My most recent one is probably Cobalt Core, if I'm saying that right. It's a fantastic.
That was our indie showcase from the most previous episode 188, if you want to check it out. Fantastic little deck building, space shooter, roguelike. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, there's countless ones. I think I got 30XX, Shotgun King, the one that just came out from a TUI, I forget what the Rogue... the
Rogue Dungeon, yeah.
Yeah, Rogue Dungeon, I picked that up. That's pretty fun as well.
The Qbert roguelike, yeah.
Yeah. It's so if you want any recommendations, just go to All In Podcast.
It's true. I mean, just like the credibility that you guys have, and not only that, but just like the love that you have for video games and indie games specifically. Because I just don't really think that we get enough talk on indie games, and that you invite indie developers on your show. Like, that's huge.
Yeah. I've been doing this for a very long time. I've been playing games pretty consistently since I was 4 years old, which, I mean, if you're watching the video of this right now, you can tell that is a very long time. But yeah, I grew up on I was there at the early days of the original NES, and I have been a very passionate lifelong gamer since then. And we're just trying to spread the love, trying to spread the history, trying to spread the good word of gaming throughout the world, and trying to be positive while we're doing it.
Yeah, we need more of that for sure. But when you have a show with Johnny on it, that doesn't happen a lot. So
Is that a pot shot? I was all right. So I was in a good mood today. I was in a really good mood today because the Cowboys got blown out yesterday.
They did.
Now it has come full circle, and the Eagles are sucking.
Yeah, so, well, I'm a Tennessee Titans fan, so we didn't even make it to the postseason. And honestly, the next few years of our franchise is not looking too great. But yeah, the Eagles up into week 12 were essentially looking like they were unstoppable. And then something, somehow, somewhere, some why, the franchise just fell off a cliff. And I have an AJ Brown jersey. I love AJ Brown. Jalen Hurts was looking really good earlier on in the year. There was a lot to be excited about when it came to the Eagles franchise. And then they were just like, you know what? We'd rather sit at home.
Yeah. At this point, I would rather them not made the playoffs because they would have had a better pick in the draft. And now it's just like another wasted season.
You don't very often see a safety in the playoffs. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, a big problem is their coaching, but that is not for this podcast. I'm making an Eagles
spot. I'm making Johnny. Just there for you, man.
Thank you. I'm making an Eagles or an all Philly podcast where we could all just feel the pain together of all Philly sports because it happens every year for every sport. All right. Anyway, but before we get into this, we like to do some server maintenance. And what do we got? We have surpassed 6,000 total plays, audio listens on all audio platforms. So that is awesome. Thank you for everybody that listens on those platforms. And if you are listening on those platforms, make sure you drop reviews. I think we got another 5-star on Spotify. And then we did get another review on Apple. And I don't know. I think we actually got 2. But I only see one. I only see one new one. This one's from Runic Bread 55670. Says good conversations, 5 stars. I love video games. I definitely binge this podcast regularly. Highly recommend that newcomers do too. They binge this podcast. I'm sorry for what you have to hear me say over and over and over again.
That's got to be like so much Advil that person is taking.
Just Tums.
And their name is Runic Bread too, so I just imagine they're just like gorging on bread while they're binging the show the entire time.
Yep.
So it's just like, fattening the mind and the body at the same time.
Exactly.
So that's from Runic Bread, but No Less Guy said that he left a 5-star. Maybe that is No Less Guy? I don't know. Anyway, leave a 5-star again if you haven't already. And then the other thing, we did get a question on Spotify from Rival06. Do you have a Discord server? If so, how do I join it? Well, there is a Discord server, and you can check the show notes. There's a link to it. YouTube makes it easy. I think you just click on the link in YouTube. But, yeah. And then we're getting close to 200 subs on YouTube.
Nice.
Yeah, it's awesome. So thank you, guys. But I think before we get into our topic at hand, it's a question that we were asking everybody. I'm actually kind of nervous tonight because I think I already know the answer. Is it Super Mario Bros. 3 or Super Mario World? What's your answer?
Super Mario World.
Oh my God. What is happening?
My God. See, I love this. Every time I think someone's going to say Super Mario Bros. 3, and I lower my expectations, and then they say Super Mario Bros. World, and I get all excited, and Johnny's mad again, and this is the best day ever.
Well, see, here's the thing. Me preferring objectively one of the greatest platformers ever made is not me also saying that I think that Super Mario Bros. 3 is trash. That is far from what I'm saying. Super Mario Bros. 3 is likewise one of the best platformers ever made. The one thing for me that tips it over the edge is with everything that's packed into Super Mario Bros. 3, a lot of people don't realize this when they're actually playing through the game, but those levels are like 10 seconds long. just because there's so many of them. Those levels are ridiculously short, except for like some of the auto scrollers. So
That's what I
that's
like about
ultimately
it.
what.
That's what I like about it. It's like a speed running thing. It feels much better to speed run it.
And if you like that aspect of it, more power to you. But I like a little bit more meat on my bones. With the Mario Brothers 3 levels, I feel like I'm just getting into them by the time I see the curtain. So, but that's the one thing. Not to say that I still wouldn't absolutely play Super Mario Brothers 3 if I had it in front of me right now. 1,000% would. But that's also me saying that I think Super Mario World is the best 2D platformer of all time. So,
Wow.
really, when it comes to other examples of the genre, you're not quite going to stand up. But Super Mario World for me.
There you go, Johnny. Mark it.
Yeah, I got to stop marking it. I thought in 2024 it was going to be different answers. Guess not.
I mean, like you said, Eric, at the beginning of the show, we did come on to the All In podcast to talk about Mario Wonder. And I think that was one of your big critiques of it, is that it was just too short and that there wasn't enough to keep the game going.
Yeah. The thing with Mario Wonder is we've relatively recently, gotten Super Mario 3D World as, Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury.
Mm-hmm.
And when I have the Mario game with by far the most robust amount of post-game content,
Mm-hmm.
and, recently in my memory, I don't know. I just, next to that, now, again, Mario Wonder is really, really good, but there are better Mario platformers on the Nintendo Switch. That's all
So
I'm
it's
saying.
funny. It's funny that you said that because I actually loaded up 3D World this past weekend, and I beat the main story. I beat it on Wii U, but I beat the main story, and then I played the first post credit world, and then there's another world after that. And I know there's at least one more. I don't know how many there are, but I know there's one with like
All of
Champions
them.
Road and
Yes. Yeah. Champions Road is another thing. That's a ridiculous level. So it actually took me, oh man, I'm trying to remember if I even beat it on the Wii U. That was one of the big things about playing it on the Nintendo Switch for me, is I really wanted to go back, and because the game actually keeps track of every character you've beaten it with, I did want to go back and fully check every single one of those blocks. I wanted to beat every stage with every character, so that meant kind of buckling down and really mastering Champions Road.
How long did that take you?
It's that patch of gray hair right there. That's how long it took.
I definitely beat Champions Road on Wii U, and I do have proof. There is a video on my YouTube channel. So Cheesy, don't say I didn't beat it, because I did beat it.
He still didn't say it.
I mean, yeah, right now you're just saying words. We need proof.
Just check out my YouTube channel. You gotta subscribe to Johnny Ebo on
you
YouTube.
gotta post that link. No, you gotta do the work for us.
Anyway, all right. So this week's episode is about AAA Gaming. Eric, what are your general thoughts on the state of AAA Gaming right now?
Okay, how long do you have? All right, let's do this. In terms of the sustainability and the viability of the future of AAA gaming, I'll start by saying this. When it comes to sustainability specifically, we've been given a very objective answer to that question over the past couple of years within the industry. And that is, for many AAA developers, that is a big fat no. Sometime in the middle of 2023, the sheer number and frequency of the layoffs within the industry itself wound up becoming a story, so much so that there's actually a website out there called Video Game Layoffs that keeps track of all of them, because they keep happening. Throughout the course of 2022, there were estimated 8,500 layoffs within the industry. In 2023, there were an estimated 10,500 layoffs within the industry. So if you're doing the math, within the past 2 years, that's just under 20,000 jobs lost within the video games industry. And that has come as a direct result of so many of these developers, many of them AAA, discovering that it's not as viable and trying to continually chase that that idea of a perfect game in today's market is just not financially viable, unfortunately. And so many people are paying with their jobs for these AAA developers to discover that. And it's really, really heartbreaking. Now, I say for most AAA developers, there are a couple out there, Nintendo being a big example, who have been able to, just because of their sheer size, the sheer number of IP, and the sheer number of teams they have working on stuff, they can sustain it because of the model that they have in place, because of the identity that they have set for themselves. Sega, Square Enix, Activision Blizzard, they probably couldn't do something like this, but one of the really interesting stories I thought that came out of 2023 was the fact that Nintendo delayed Tears of the Kingdom by a full year just to polish it, just for tweaks and polish and game feel. Mm-hmm. Try to think of any other AAA game developer, game publisher that could get away with simply pushing a game back for an extra year, adding an entire extra year of game development budget on top of whatever they've already spent just to polish it up a little bit more. Yeah, Nintendo can do that, but most companies cannot.
You had mentioned Activision, and I think they were supposed to skip a year for Call of Duty, and they decided not to.
Well, Activision plays very deeply into this story as well, because one of the big things is with this brand new PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X generation that we found ourselves in a couple of years, we've discovered that game budgets have ballooned immensely over the past half decade. One of the many things that came out last year from the acquisition, as we called it over at All In, the massive acquisition of Xbox acquiring Activision Blizzard, we actually got to see their books and we got to see some of the budgets for these games. You just mentioned Call of Duty. We got to see the budget for Call of Duty. We got to see the budgets for some of their AAA games. And we're talking $250-300 million for individual titles. That is absolutely bonkers.
Yeah.
At $70 a piece, if your game budget is $300 million, at $70 a pop, you're going to have to sell upwards of 4 million units. And that's not taking into account shipping, marketing, taxes, anything like that. You need to sell more than 4 million units just to break even. Let me ask you guys a question real quick. How many games, we'll go back to the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, because that generation has already finished. How many games do you think on the PlayStation 4, based on the numbers, the sales numbers we have, that passed 4 million in sales?
On the PlayStation 4 alone?
On the PlayStation 4 alone. How many games, based on the sales numbers we were given, passed 4 million in sales?
From Activision or just in general?
Across the board on the entire console.
Oh, man.
14.
Maybe 14? And I'm assuming they're all exclusives, right? Like, well, most of them, and maybe Call of Duty.
And on the Xbox One, that number drops to 3.
Whoa.
Witcher 3, PUBG, Halo 5 Guardians.
And PUBG wasn't even a $70 game. Like that was
no.
I think it's
those are the only games on the Xbox One that surpassed 4 million in sales. So just very quickly taking these numbers that I've thrown out, this little paradigm that I've thrown out, say that Halo 5 Guardians budget, this was an Xbox One game, not an Xbox Series X game. But just imagine if that game's budget were around $253 million. It's one of the 3 best selling games on the console. And by those numbers, it would have just barely recouped its budget. That's not sustainable.
So I just saw that Street Fighter 6 surpassed 3 million copies.
Yes. Yeah, we're going to see a few. There are outlying factors. There are absolutely those games like God of War and I think it was God of War, and there was another one I was looking at on PlayStation 4 that actually sold upwards of 20 million. So you do have those games that are
like
going to
Last of
sell
Us.
just a ridiculous amount. But even in the AAA space, the vast majority of games, even in the AAA space, are not going to sell upwards of 2 or even 3 million. Bloodborne, as iconic and legendary a game as it's become, it only reached 2 million based on the sales numbers we were given. Now, there are a lot of mitigating factors in those numbers that I've given you already, and I know a lot of people in the comments are already yelling at me saying, "Well, Game Pass, you idiot. That's why a lot of those numbers are so much lower on the Xbox One." And yes, absolutely, you're 1,000% right. Because in this day and age, so many developers and so many publishers are having to look to more non-traditional profit methods in order to sustain their business, in order to cover development costs. And another big one that we always see is DLC and microtransactions. Those are big, those are prevalent throughout the entire industry, and they're basically guaranteed to show up in any AAA release at this point. Just thinking off the top of my head, I can't really think of a AAA game release that didn't include additional purchases.
Tears of the Kingdom.
I was about to say a couple Nintendo games, yes, but
Odyssey.
Odyssey. Most of the Nintendo first party titles, yes, but on the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox Series 1 and the Series X, the vast majority of those games are going to include some type of additional transactions, some type of additional, ways that the company can still try to make money. Because since the early 90s, brand new video games really haven't gone up in price that much. I paid $60 for a brand new video game back in the early 90s. So this idea of video games going to $70 and people being incredibly outraged by that, I'm like, do you guys realize how lucky we are that they're just now going to $70 at this point? The amount of money being spent, the budgets being thrown at these games since the early 90s, I can only imagine how many hundreds of percentages that's gone up. The budget for a AAA game was probably just a couple $1,000,000 in the early 90s, especially as the industry was finding its own foothold and, game developers, game publishers were really finding their own identity. Now, again, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, and many of these games coming out are still retailing for $60. That's not a sustainable business method. And again, that's why so many have gone to, dealing with Xbox, because somehow Xbox has literally all of the money and they're able to pay these developers and publishers to have their game appear on Game Pass, or they have season pass or DLC cosmetics, microtransactions that they're able to sell. The problem with all of those are so many of those are red flags for gamers. Like when they see microtransactions, when they see video game storefronts, when they see, in-game currency, it's a massive red flag for many people. And I do get that. But, for a lot of these companies, it's trying to find new ways to cover costs because the overhead of game sales isn't doing that. That's one of the reasons that so few publishers, even AAA publishers, are even releasing physical copies of their games. Square Enix, very famously, really doesn't even do that anymore. And one of the big reasons that a lot of game developers and publishers are moving away from physical media because of how much it cuts into their costs and how much it cuts into their bottom line. It's incredibly interesting, this conversation, especially in the year 2024, because we are finding so many companies finding out in real time right around now that, oh no, we've been outpacing, like, the budgets, and our ideas and our visions for these games are very clearly outpacing our wallets and outpacing basically gamers' time in general. It was very interesting last year, specifically when Ubisoft came out and said that, we've looked at a lot of the Assassin's Creed games we've released over the past few years, and we're actually going to tone it back. we're actually, instead of these games being 100, 120 hours time sinks, instead, this new Assassin's Creed will be, 30 hours to 100%. They have greatly scaled back the size of their experience, and because of that, the budget that it took to create that experience. Because I think that's yet another factor at the AAA space is so many developers and so many publishers, when they create a game, everybody wants their game to be an event release. Everybody wants their game release to be treated like it is the next Street Fighter, like it is the next Tears of the Kingdom. They want to give players this epic, you see that word all the time, this epic level experience that people will remember for the rest of their lives. The problem is there's a large price tag associated with that when it comes to development costs. Nobody wants to give an inch, essentially, within this industry. Nobody wants to admit defeat. Nobody wants, I'm showing my age here. Everybody wants to rule the world, essentially. So you have all these developers all trying to make the greatest game of all time, the best game of the year, and their wallets just, they can't sustain that race any longer. And that's where so many of these layoffs are coming into play. Earlier today, before we recorded this, we just found out about the Halo Battle Royale that got canceled.
So
I didn't hear about that.
Oh, you didn't hear about that? Yeah. Yeah, there was an unannounced Halo Battle Royale that just got canceled again. The budget fairy, visiting AAA developers and saying, yeah, you overextended yourself again this time, buddy. But it's, but all the causality of what happened in the 2010s, and especially with all these yearly releases like Assassin's Creed, like Call of Duty, a lot of those, a lot of those hens are coming home to roost, and a lot of those seeds being sown, they are reaping what they're sowing today. And unfortunately, a lot of incredibly talented developers within the industry are once again paying for it with their jobs.
So yeah, I mean, it's incredibly sad. And last week, Johnny and I don't know, like we kind of ended on a sad note, or I ended on a sad note because I said the gaming is a bubble.
It's not going away.
I think that it is a bubble. Like, it could pop. And then at what point, do we ever get back to what games were, or is it like games are just oversaturated and, we can't make these big budget games anymore? We had Names Jer comment on YouTube saying, I kind of agree with Cheesy that it's all a bit scary. Gaming, especially AAA, continues to be this weird predictor of where the economy in general is going as a whole. We're seeing how gaming has been the catalyst for a lot of gross monetizations in other industries, like BMW's heated seat subscriptions, which I didn't even know was a thing, or the Adobe Suite and Microsoft Office becoming subscriptions rather than programs you purchase. Eventually, everything will be subscriptions and microtransactions, and we'll be owning nothing. Doom and gloom thinking aside, though, I still love a good, huge budget AAA blockbuster game like Spider-Man or God of War. While indie is where the innovation happens, I can't deny the feeling I get when you get one of those massive set pieces in AAA games. It can be really awesome and jaw-dropping. So then, how do you feel about games and being in a bubble? And sorry, Johnny, I keep cutting you off.
No, that's fine.
No, go ahead, Johnny.
I was just gonna say, like, he mentioned that he likes games like Spider-Man 2, and we know the budget of Spider-Man 2 is like $315 million. And I think I've said this before, I don't know where it was. Like, where is this $315 million going? And I think Noah's guy in the Discord showed about how much they spend on advertising.
Yep.
And just like movies, like you have a huge budget, and a lot of it is because of advertising. And it looks like video games are going to go the same way. So, say the game costs $100 million to make, but then you spend $200 million to advertise it. That is not sustainable. And I think, with Nintendo probably not going as powerful as PS5 and Xbox Series X, their budgets are going to stay they're not going to get as high as $300 million, I don't think.
Nintendo's going to keep their budgets manageable. They're still going to be high, but Nintendo Now, Nintendo, I think, has found a very good rhythm that works for them. And again, they've got enough irons in the fire that they can afford to take a little extra time with some of their more marquee titles. Like they wouldn't do this with a Paper Mario game, but they would absolutely take that year for the next Zelda game. I mean, we get one of those every 6-7 years. Those are event releases. So when it comes to that, Nintendo would spend a little bit of extra budget. But again, just because they have so many games and so many teams working on stuff, they can afford to fight the war on several fronts.
And yeah, as far as like gaming being a bubble, what are your thoughts on that? Because I mean, just listening from you talk, like it is very scary in the direction that we're going. But
It is.
can it be fixed?
Oh, absolutely. And it will. And we're already seeing the ship righting itself. Unfortunately, we're seeing some very severe short-term negative effects, and those are the job layoffs. But a lot of these developers, a lot of these companies are kind of reconsolidating a bunch of things. They're very strongly reassessing what their priorities are. They're very strongly reassessing their position moving into the future. We saw, Sega, come out and announce 5 brand new retro IPs are coming back over the next couple of years.
Mhm.
So that to me very clearly says that Sega as a company had some pretty strong come to Jesus moments over the past couple of years in terms of what they want to achieve as a company, what they think they can achieve as a company, and what they want their identity to be going forward. We saw this with Activision, as I mentioned previously, in terms of scaling back the size of their experiences. But ultimately, yeah, AAA gaming is the only place where you can get those big cinematic set piece moments like you're talking about. The train from Uncharted, the stuff from Spider-Man 2 like he was talking about. AAA games are the experiences that are going to deliver that. Companies just need to find a way to they need to find a more happy medium in terms of the budgetary concerns and in terms of trying to provide the best gaming experience that they can while trying to find a profit model that works for them. Now, one of the things that game companies, game publishers have been doing this entire time is, we mentioned about the number of games that have sold 4 million on individual consoles. That's why most games come out on multiple consoles, is to try to, expand their sales as much as possible. But just in terms of it being a bubble, I do think it is a bubble, but it is a very, very large, gorgeous, diverse bubble where a lot of different things can exist. Gaming is a landscape where you can see those incredibly creative, incredibly innovative ideas at the indie scale. Like we love indie games over at All In. You guys know that. So many of the most interesting ideas within the industry are coming from the indie scene these days. But unfortunately, the team behind Cobalt Core is not going to be able to make the same type of experience that the team over at Insomniac can do with,
Right.
Spider-Man. There is absolutely room within this world. The town is big enough for both of us. But for a lot of the big developers and the big publishers right now, this is a time of reckoning. We're seeing that again in real time over these past couple of years with so many big AAA companies realizing that they're outpacing the hardware with their wallets. And I do think, unfortunately, I do think that throughout the rest of 2024, I think we will continue to see large numbers of layoffs. It would not surprise me if that number actually went up and was even larger than 2023's number. And I do feel for everybody who has or is probably going to be laid off. And I hope they all wind up on their feet because there are so many incredibly talented people out there that deserve to work within this space. But as bigger companies are restructuring and trying to find themselves within the AAA space of 2024 and what creating a AAA game takes anymore, we're going to see, I think, a lot more restructuring, a lot more I guess ultimately at the end of the day, I think we're just going to see a lot more compromise.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think you had mentioned Assassin's Creed, the new one, Mirage. I
Yep.
believe was the fastest selling Assassin's Creed for like a long. I forget since when, but it was like the fastest selling in a long time, and that's because it was lower cost to the consumer. I think it was $50 at launch. So I think we'll see more of those type of experiences, like even Prince of Persia that is coming out this week. Like that's a $50 game. That's not,
Yep.
and I'm assuming that budget's not big. I mean, who knows? And I know they also had the Avatar game come out in December, which I don't think it performed that well. So they're probably going to lean more into these smaller experiences that will cost the consumer less, and then also cost less for them as well to make.
Yeah. Now, for the companies like Nintendo, like Bethesda, like Activision Blizzard that can sustain those many irons in the fire, you will see a lot of them, come out with AAA game, but they're always going to be working on the next big marquee release. They're always going to have the next Tears of the Kingdom, the next Starfield waiting in the wings for those bigger companies. They'll
Hmm.
have incredible experiences come out in the interim, but that idea, that want, that desire to still make the greatest gaming experience of all time, that's still there. Everybody still wants to put their best foot forward, but being able to do that in 2024 is becoming a lot more complicated of an issue at the AAA level.
And you could see
Yeah.
that because the publishers release one game, like PlayStation releases one major game a year essentially. We had Spider-Man last year. We had, I forget, God of War was the year before, or Horizon. They only do like one big title a year, and then they get supplemented by all of the other third-party games.
But I'll tell
And
you one thing that could very well happen is the fewer AAA games that come out just puts more of a focus on indie titles. So you could see kind of a paradigm shift of indie games kind of taking over a bigger market share of the industry over AAA experiences. I mean, who
I mean,
knows?
I hope so, but do you think that the audience that is wanting to play AAA games is going to play an indie game and not in I'm just trying to get in their shoes, maybe possibly that they think that it's a downgrade and a lesser experience and it's not going to be as good as maybe a game that they were really looking forward to as the next like Last of Us or God of War or whatever that AAA game is. Like, do you see that kind of audience playing indie games? And I'm not just talking about like gamers that are in the gaming space, but just the casuals.
I mean, there are going to be those people that just it's never going to be for them. And I mean,
Hmm.
that's okay, play what you enjoy. But I do think you will see by larger and larger numbers of people because indie games have also become a lot bigger part of the conversation over the
Hmm.
past few years. They've been getting a lot of exposure at big events, like the E3, the June and July time frame, big marquee showcase events. They've been getting a lot of exposure and a lot of talking point time at stuff like the Game Awards, Summer Games Fest, and a lot of people are much more aware of the indie side of things than they used to be. And I think you'll slowly but surely start to move casual gamers over to more indie experiences, especially since indie experiences, while still not on the level necessarily of the AAA, indie games by themselves have become so much more sophisticated over the
Hmm.
past several years that they can, even though they're not necessarily on the same level, they can still provide at least a facsimile of some of the experiences that people can get from the AAA releases. And the indie side of things is just going to continue to get more and more sophisticated as time goes on. So, for some people, indie games are just not going to be their thing. But more and more, as more indie games come out, as more indie games are marketed, as more information is put out, you are going to see some people just say, you know what, I'll check this one out, and they'll pop the game in. they'll download the game.
Yeah.
Um, and they'll find it's like, oh, there actually is something to this indie space. I remember exactly the moment when it happened for me. It was on my Xbox 360, and it was a little $1 game called I Made a Game with Zombies in it.
Yeah, I think
What
my I
happened?
think my first indie game that I can remember is Shovel Knight. Well, like that I backed out on Kickstarter, and I love that game, and that
Yeah.
just made me want to play other indie games.
Yeah, it's amazing. Shovel Knight's fantastic. There's so many genuinely amazing indie games out there that they will start to, I believe, they will start to entice more and more people over to the indie side of things, because the casual gaming market is an incredibly large portion of the gaming landscape. There are a lot of people that will only pick up, the new Spider-Man, that will only pick up the newest Madden or the newest Call of Duty. So for those people, maybe having Madden or Call of Duty move to, bi-yearly releases, maybe that would actually help. But I think that's a conversation for another day. But regardless, the industry, there's way too much money flowing through the industry for it to just simply collapse. Somebody is going to pick up the slack when it comes to the game sales. Somebody is going to pick up the slack when it comes to the amount of audience that the lack of AAA games, if that does happen, is leaving in its wake. The industry may morph, it may change, and unfortunately some more people are probably going to lose their jobs because of it, but eventually everything kind of will settle in to a new norm. We will find a new median, a new kind of even kilter with this industry once everything is said and done. Or the gaming industry is so unique and so beautiful, and this wonderful big caterpillar constantly turning into a big, beautiful butterfly. Maybe it'll just always be in a state of shift from now on. Maybe the rise of indie game, because the rise of indie games came from this almost counterculture movement to, just the constant deluge of samey feeling AAA games. So maybe there'll be some weird counterculture, anti indie game movement that continues to push the industry forward. That's one of the reasons I love video games, is because the ongoing history of this industry is so ridiculously interesting to me. It's never not entertaining. It's never not interesting to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I
we
can at least think of like 4 indie games that I'm looking forward to this year that just have a huge impact because of their developers or the game before it. Like Silk Song is one of the biggest
That's not coming
anticipated
out this
indie
year. I don't know
games.
what you're talking about.
No, I'm not saying. I'm just saying. I don't
Crawler,
know. You don't.
Crawler, if you're listening, Silk Song is not coming out this year.
Oof. I mean, I hope it does. I hope
I
it
do
does.
too.
But
I do
but
too.
like, it's crazy when you think that is, or it was a team of 4 people. I don't know if it still is, and that's like one of the most anticipated indie games ever, probably.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
To the
I
point
mean,
where people are disappointed whenever it doesn't show up. That's well, when your game is not featured and that's the headline for most people, I think you're doing something right.
yeah.
But
What were you gonna say, Johnny?
oh, I play. Oh, so the industry has always been changing. We've
Mhm.
gone through console developers that are no longer developing consoles. We've gone through there used to be AA games, and not it was in between. Well, it
Yeah,
was AAA and then AA, which was lesser budgets, smaller games, and now that's kind of been replaced with the indie games.
you're
So
right.
maybe we see those AA games kind of come back, smaller experiences, smaller budgets, but not necessarily indie. Just
Yeah. Yeah, not necessarily indie, but like, the Klonoas, the Sphinx and the Cursed Mummies, the Scalers, those games.
Mm-hmm.
If any of you out there know any of the games I'm talking about, I love you, by the way. Um, but
well,
yeah,
I know Klonoa. I know that one.
yeah, the Fantasy Reverie series on the Nintendo Switch was a really big fun revisit for me last year. But I would like to see a lot of those AA games come back as well, because they were kind of like the indies of their day. A lot of them A lot of them felt like real hidden gems, but you felt like such a hipster whenever you found a good one. It was like, bro, you got to check this game out. You think Mario Kart's good, bro? Check out Diddy Kong Racing.
I do think Nintendo does have some games that are kind of AA, like Captain Toad. Like that's not a very well known game, and it's not to the scale of their AAA games.
Well, it's a different experience, but Nintendo games are they're always going to have that polish. They may offer different experiences, but just because of the level of, like, there's still a lot of budget going into Captain Toad compared to other titles, and especially compared to indie games. So it may not be their Zelda, but I personally would still consider Captain Toad a AAA release. A very different
You
one.
heard it here first. Captain Toad, AAA. We need a sequel.
We do. We absolutely need a sequel.
We do need a sequel.
Yeah, that's one thing that Johnny and I will always agree on, is that Captain Toad is a great game. It's very underrated. More people need to play it.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm still legitimately mad at Nintendo for not giving me a Captain Toad amiibo.
Oh, yeah.
Especially with Captain Toad being in the movie.
Also, we
need more Captain Toad love.
When Captain Toad came out on the Wii U, you could get it with a Toad amiibo. So, like, why not just make that a Captain Toad?
Yeah. I did see some really good custom Captain Toad amiibos when that game came out, though. I really almost hit up someone on Etsy, be like, "Here, can you Captain Toadify my Toad amiibo, please?" But yeah, Captain Toad sequel, yes, please and thank you, Nintendo. I would take that. There's a lot of games that I would buy those. So it's not really saying much.
We got a specific question for Eric. I told people on our Discord that you are a fan of fighting games.
Oh, yes.
So, Noah's Guy asks, what have you seen positive happening to the fighting game scene now that the budgets are bigger? Any negatives? Now, before you get into it, I want to say my negative is paying $10 for a fatality in Mortal Kombat.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of the microtransactions that I spoke about when we were talking about AAA sustainability, fighting games are a massive, massive offender when it comes to those. The Street Fighter games alone, oh man, I think if you tally up like all the different transactions, if you paid full price for all the transactions in Street Fighter 5, obviously you wouldn't pay this much, but if you for some reason decided that you hate money and wanted to pay full price for all the different add-ons, it would cost you several $1,000s.
You don't know me too well.
But yes, microtransactions and season passes and stuff like that, the genre has really kind of fallen back on those to cover a lot of the upfront costs that are missing because, again, games haven't really increased in price in the past 35 years. So that's why we see all of those. I'm not saying that I think that WB, the company that produces Mortal Kombat, or that Capcom, are going to be going bankrupt anytime soon. But at the end of the day, for the people making the monetary decisions, for the accounting departments, for the people with the checkbooks, they don't see them as games. They don't see them as creative passion projects. They don't see the people working behind them. They see them as assets that need to bring in revenue. And how do we do that? So
you never know with the WB, because WB could cut ties with anything at any time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, WB has multiverses. WB, obviously, they own NetherRealm Studios, the makers of both the Injustice series and the Mortal Kombat series, obviously. So yeah, we're starting to see that like terribly permeate the fighting game landscape. And I really wish that I could offer a solution for how video game developers and publishers could start to better cover overhead costs, how they could make more money without making people feel like they're being fleeced, without people feeling like they're being cheated. Because I don't know, it's a hard thing to say. You got video game developers like, we spent $300 million on this thing. Could you just spend $5 extra on a skin just to help us out? Mm-hmm. But you do have people saying, listen, I've only got so much disposable income. I work 2 jobs, I've got to pay rent, you know, I've already paid $60 for your game. I don't want to have to pay $10 more every time I want to do something even remotely new in it. I do get both of those. I do get both of those sides. And unfortunately, I think that's not going to change until there's a massive governmental overhaul, uh, increasing the living wage and all that stuff. But that's so far removed from what we're talking about. But at the end of the day, people want to get the most out of their money, and video game developers and publishers want to try to be able to cover their incredible overhead costs. So for the foreseeable future, stuff like this is still going to happen. Microtransactions and season passes and DLC and new editions of games, those are just going to be things we are going to continue to see, especially within the fighting game landscape for, frankly, years to come. But if I ever come up with the golden plan that will make everybody happy, I will make sure to let you guys know.
And we will have you back on because we want to hear you talk about it.
And I will have the PowerPoint up on this TV behind me. I will go step by step, line by line, bullet point by bullet point on how everybody can be happy. But
yeah,
until that happens,
I think it's hard for people to understand that if you want this game to be free, like just free to play games like Fortnite, if you want Fortnite to be free, you have to have some type of monetary option. It doesn't mean that you have to spend money on it. You don't have to spend any extra money on it. For Fortnite, it's mostly cosmetic stuff. I didn't like how I don't know. I didn't like how Mortal Kombat's was like fatalities, where you had to pay for fatalities.
Yeah,
which used to be something that you would unlock in a game. But I do understand. I understand why they need these microtransactions. I know it's really hard for people to hear. But once you see these budgets and once you see how much these games cost to make, like they need some type of mechanic to make that money back. And unfortunately, microtransactions is where they're at right now. Like I think Madden makes most of their money on the packs
yeah. That's why a lot of that's a fantastic point. So many of the sports franchises have gone to this. This kind of card base, you open up these card packs to unlock these athletes that you can use for your all Madden team or whatever it is for your sports game of choice. And having these, I mean, they're loot boxes. They're effectively loot boxes, and having that mechanic is a big way that those games are subsidizing their budgets as well. I know there was that big court ruling that came down in Holland or Sweden, I think, where the official government of the country actually declared loot boxes as gambling. And that really put a kibosh on a lot of stuff, despite the fact that, that part of the world isn't necessarily the biggest, the biggest audience in terms of sheer numbers, but just the domino effect that could have potentially had, I know, moved a lot of developers and publishers away from those types of practices. But they're always on the hunt looking for ways that they can continue to generate revenue. That's why we're starting to see ads show up in games. So like they've from their perspectives, like we've got to make, like, we would love to give you all of these games that you want, but we do have to keep the lights on. We do have to pay all the people making these games, and occasionally we'd also like to buy ourselves something pretty.
Yeah,
of course, that's from a grunt level. Of course, all the CEOs have 1,000 different ways to make money outside of the games industry, and I'm not worried about them whatsoever.
Yeah, but when you were talking about like how we do see, like we're seeing ads in our games, I forget which NBA 2K it is, but they put Jake from State Farm in the game, and he's got like speaking dialogue, and it's just so weird. And like you get it because gaming is the biggest like entertainment medium right now. And we talked a lot about movies last week and how that is becoming the new norm, and that is probably going to get oversaturated. And I'm assuming that the money that they make from those games or from those movies is going to go towards the games, but that means that they have to have a bigger budget for these movies. It's just I don't know. There's just so much on the line. There's also so much good that could come out of it just from an entertainment standpoint.
You should watch Toys That Made Us. Such
Okay.
a fascinating show.
Yeah.
I've seen movies that made us, so I just need to get around to toys that made us.
Yeah, I think Toys That
Okay.
Made Us would make more sense for what I'm about to talk about. So
Okay.
take Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, for example. Those TV shows, the TV shows of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, were only there to advertise the toys.
Yep.
And that's what these adaptations are trying to do. So we saw that the Mario games increased their sales once the Super Mario Bros. Movie came out. I'm sure. I think The Last of Us did become like the top selling game on Amazon when that came out, and Halo, people returned their copies when that season came out.
Yes.
But
yeah,
the whole
no,
the whole point of
yeah.
these adaptations are to broaden, to expand their brand, and to get more people to buy the games.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's the whole point of cross promotion. That's
Yeah, and
literally the whole point of cross promotion.
a big thing that Nintendo said or has recently said is that they want more people to recognize their IP. So if they have to get it in front of theme parks or movies, or we got those Pikmin shorts. They're doing collabs with pretty much not everyone, but they have Lego and some clothing brands and like Baskin Robbins and Cold Stone. So
Mercedes
oh yeah, you're right. Yeah.
from Mario Kart.
Yeah,
That was
I hope the
amazing.
next
I
Mario
love that.
Kart. I hope the next Mario Kart's just like a Fast and Furious crossover. Drive a Dodge Charger.
and it's all about family.
Yeah, it's all about
course.
family.
Yeah.
I actually pitched Mario Kart 9 on the show. It's portals, essentially. Every
Oh,
lap
nice.
is on a different track.
That would be cool.
Oh.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just want a new Mario Kart. I don't care what it is.
But Mario Kart's actually another great example of what we've been talking about this entire time. The DLC and additional content. Nintendo hasn't had to develop a brand new game. They basically just created more content for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and throughout the course of 2 years, sold it to us as part of the Booster Course Pass. That was a greatly decreased budget from creating Mario Kart 9. What would have been Mario Kart 9, but essentially what we wound up getting was, a double-sized, jumbo-packed version of what I believe is the best arcade racer ever made. So, I mean, it's hard to argue against what we got. I do absolutely understand the people that would love to see Mario Kart 9, but with the amount of money, with the amount of development budget it would take versus cannibalizing the best-selling game on the console, there is zero, even to this day, even now that the Booster Course Pass has finished, I still think Nintendo, for at least right now, still has zero financial incentive to begin development on Mario Kart 9. But I might be wrong. We'll see.
To begin development?
Yeah, that's
You don't think they've been working
crazy.
on it for 10 years?
They've been they may have a few concepts. I'm sure they've got some ideas. They're always thinking about it. But
That game's coming out this year. What are you talking about?
Mario
You,
Kart 9.
hold
All
on.
right,
You think
all
it's
right,
coming out this year?
all right.
It's
Clip
coming.
that.
It's coming out
Clip
when
that.
the new console comes out. It will be a launch. It might not be a launch title, but it will be a launch window for the new console. Because I get what you're saying. I understand why they wouldn't want to put it on the Switch, because there's really no need for it at this point. But if you get the Mario Kart, a new Mario Kart on the next platform as soon as possible, that's going to sell consoles no matter what.
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. You'll have to come back to this episode when that happens.
In September
do.
of 2024, because
According to Game Shark, right?
yeah, AI Shark. It's AI Shark
Yeah,
now.
AI Shark. Yeah.
No, we had this whole conversation on the Nintendo Powercast, and Cheesy would not agree with me that is a correct leak, and it's coming out September 2024.
We don't know that.
It's 100% happening.
It's not official from
It's
Nintendo.
100%. It's just like
We've
we're
had-
getting a Nintendo Direct in February. It's not official, but we know it's happening.
Yeah, but that is more reliable than these like sources that are coming through.
This is an actual developer though. Like it's a developer of a.
Come on, man. That's so easy for them right now to just mention anything Nintendo Switch 2 related because now people know of AI Shark. Like, yeah, they knew Game Shark, but now that they're AI Shark, I mean, that's all branding. Nintendo Switch 2 has been trending every day.
Game Shark would have been
new year, Johnny.
It would have been trending. No, like if Game Shark was like, hey, we used to be Game Shark, like that's going to be trending. They didn't need the Nintendo Switch 2.
I don't know. I do agree with you, Cheesy. I think that Seth actually made this point as well, that just simply by them having this quote unquote Switch 2 leak in their little press release got them so much more coverage than they probably would have otherwise. I did have to wonder if that was just a very shrewd marketing team move on their end. And again, that was a point specifically made by my co-host.
That'd be a pretty if they're trying to get it onto the Nintendo Switch 2 or whatever's next, like that'd be a pretty bold move to just be like, oh yeah, we're just gonna say fake information. Like Nintendo will not allow them anywhere.
Well, that's a company
anyway. If they
that's a company that's never had to deal directly with the hardware manufacturers in order to sell their products. Even when they were Game Shark, even when they were selling their products for the older consoles, they never had to deal directly with the hardware manufacturers. And I'm sure whatever product, however they're going to be marketing, this one's going to be the same way. They're not going to have to deal directly with Nintendo, so they probably wouldn't see any ramifications for false leaks, regardless of what headlines they generate.
I do think Nintendo doesn't need to reveal Nintendo Switch 2. It's trending every single day. It doesn't need to do anything. So they're exactly where they want to be. It's coming out this year and it will be fine. They could shadow drop it and it will sell out.
A shadow dropped console.
Dreamcast it. That worked out really well for Dreamcast.
I love the Dreamcast.
But yeah, on that note, I don't know. I mean, just as far as AAA gaming, I'm not going to try to like repeat myself of what I said last week. I do think that it's in a scary state. And just listening to Eric talk about AAA gaming, like it's not looking good, but maybe that is
all right.
just...
So when you say scary, like that means something completely different to me than what I think.
What you think, like Boogeyman or something, or what?
Like it's video games. Like they're not. It's not scary.
Yeah, but it's an art form. And
but they're not going anywhere. They're gonna change.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm not trying to like be Martin Scorsese here and say like, oh, cinema has changed so much and I don't like it. But like, let's be honest, like movies have changed and now they are they're more on streaming. I mean, people barely go to the theaters anymore.
I went to the movies on Friday.
Well, think about it this way, guys. I think this is a much more exciting way to look at it. Video games have been around for long enough at this point that just like any other art form, it's more than likely about to go into a new era as paintings have gone through the Impressionist and the Neoclassicism and whatever eras, and French nepotism or whatever types of different artistic eras that paintings and books and films have gone through. We're just more than likely about to enter a different era of video games. So I think we, being at the forefront of this new era, should just go ahead and name it. I think that we should name it the All-In Eric era of gaming. I think that's a good name for this upcoming era, not to self-promote or anything, but I feel like it really rolls off the tongue. So I postulate
all those in favor? Aye.
Nice. Motion is passed. Somebody get on the horn with Microsoft, Xbox, and PlayStation. I said Microsoft, Xbox, and Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony.
This Thursday, we're going to see Microsoft, what they have. Do you think they show do you think they announce them putting their games on other consoles?
That's been a very real possibility for a very long time because, and this is another thing that my co-host has pointed out several times, is Microsoft is honestly moving more away from being a hardware developer so much as a platform developer. I think we may see Microsoft prioritize Game Pass over Xbox. I don't know how and when that's going to happen, but just the way that streaming services have taken over the way that most of us watch television, Microsoft may be envisioning that kind of future for themselves within the gaming landscape. That may be their way forward. So who knows? I do, at the end of the day, I just hope that we continue to get, the incredible handcrafted, passion-filled experiences that we've gotten that have made me such a fan of this industry the entire time. And very quickly, I didn't completely answer that fighting game question. We talked about the microtransactions, but I will say from a positive standpoint, because we do love to be positive at All In. The explosion of the indie fighting game scene has been really, really cool to see. A lot of really interesting ideas being cultivated there. I follow a Twitter feed called Indie Fighting Games, and they're constantly featuring really interesting, really cool new games coming out within the landscape. And the acceptance of fighting games at kind of the world stage, Evo and Capcom Cup, and all of these other massive world broadcast events and tournaments and tours is all like there's more hype than ever before. And you got people like Max and Ignan Rizzi and all these really great streamers out there continuing to spread the good word. I think fighting games are in a much better place than they ever have been, from not necessarily from a microtransaction point of view, but just in terms of the state of the genre, something that I absolutely couldn't say in the mid 2000s before Street Fighter 4 came out. But there's so many really cool new games coming out. Obviously, we just got a brand new Street Fighter. We're just about to get a brand new Tekken, and I could not be more excited. I've been so excited the past few months about fighting games that I've probably bought like 15 different fighting games over the past just month or so.
Over the past month, 15 different fighting games.
Yeah, I rebought Injustice 1 and 2. I rebought Mortal Kombat X, King of Fighters 14, King of Fighters 2002, Unlimited Match, King of Fighters 1998, Ultimate Match, the Art of Fighting Anthology, Fight of Gods, and several others. But I've been playing the industry and the genre it's so exciting these days. I've just been playing so many of them. As a matter of fact, we just started a brand new fighting game centric YouTube weekly YouTube drop on All In Media called Quarter Circle Forward that I host. So matter of fact,
I like that name. That's a good name.
Yeah, I just got a new logo for. We're doing a YouTube intro and everything. It's cool. So I do that weekly on All In Media now as well. So yes, I am a big fighting game nut. But I just wanted to go back and finish answering that question. Sorry.
I'm doing exclusive Mortal Kombat 1 on Nintendo Switch content. That's all I'm doing now.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot to be gleaned from that game on the Nintendo Switch. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's that is certainly one of the games of all time on the Nintendo Switch.
Well, we are a little bit over an hour, so I think you got anything else, Cheesy? I think that's all I got.
No, man. But Eric, thank you so much for being on the show. It's long overdue. I mean, you honestly probably have one of the greatest voices for gaming, like podcast, just podcasts in general. Your voice is amazing, and you just have so much
face to match.
It is so much insight.
Face for podcasting, really.
Yeah,
we used to call it a face for radio.
We made that joke.
We made that joke last week.
Oh man, not for you, but like I forget what we were. Oh, it was Johnny and I. We were like, yeah, just watch the YouTube video, subscribe, and you don't have to watch us. We know that we have faces for radio, but then we were like, do people know what a radio is anymore?
No, I mean, cheesy. I mean, you're a good-looking kid. I can imagine that your face is probably going to fill out. I'm sure once you hit puberty, but I mean, you look fine.
Yeah, maybe one day. Maybe one day.
But honestly, guys, thank you for having me on the show. Had a lot of fun. I really had quite a few thoughts on this topic, I'm sure, as you've heard. So I really appreciate you letting me, you giving me this way to get them out.
No, we appreciate that because you're much more intelligent than we are, and you put your thoughts into words. Good.
Yep. See.
But yeah, thanks for being on. We do want to do an indie game show soon, and
it would be cool to bring on like you and Seth to talk about indie games, because I honestly think that you guys are the most deserving of that guest appearance.
Well, I can promise you that Seth and I can certainly talk about indie games for a long time.
Well, where can people find you?
Well, you can absolutely find us on Spotify, on iTunes, on wherever you get your podcast from. All in, capital N, all in a Nintendo podcast, like all Nintendo. Go figure. You can also find us on Twitter at All In Podcast, on YouTube at All In. I think it's still at All In Podcast, but it's youtube.com/All In Podcast. We've got a Patreon. We've got, again, Facebook and Twitter. Come over, join our amazing Discord community. We would love to have you over there. We are just a couple old Nintendo fans just trying to make the best content we possibly can. We love to talk about indie games, and we love to talk. We do top fives, like I said, retrospectives. We do all kinds of stuff over there, and we would love for you to be a part of it.
Right on. Johnny, where can people find you?
I'm John Evo everywhere. Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and the Nintendo Powercast.
And you can find me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Threads. I'll throw it out there. It's dead right now, but that means that there's real estate, right? So, and the Nintendo Powercast, CheezyC64, CheezyC64. Eric, thank you again for being on.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I cut you off. Now, if you made it this far, you are the real ones. We forgot to do this at the top of the show, but we are changing the posting date of the episodes. They're going to be on Wednesdays now, as opposed to Tuesdays. But if you do want the show on Tuesday, join the Patreon. We're going to be doing early releases a day early. That's the main reason why we're changing it, pretty much, because I feel like our patrons have not gotten early access, but we want to give it to them.
Yeah, the most important information that we should have gave at the beginning of the show really should tell you what communication error is like.
Yeah. Well, and if you subscribe to the highest tier of their Patreon, you can actually get it Monday afternoon. You can actually get it before they record it.
I actually send it to you in the mail. Personalized note.
The way Netflix used to do it.
Well, thanks for listening, everybody. Check everything out.